Hello. I washed my hair and it shrunk.
It's shrunk. So, how are you?
What's the fee?
Well, I'll pay you off after.
Okay. How do you mean that?
Neal Cassady is Jack Kerouac's alter ego. And then after he wrote the book, Neal wouldn't talk to him, for a year and a half. He wouldn't have anything to do with him. And then I think that Neal became the character that was in the book. I think it was forced upon him, and I think that's what killed him.
He set himself on fire. A little note. This is for all the Buddhists and mysterious things.
This is for the Buddhists?
19-year-old kid. Yeah, burned himself alive.
I mean, they were totally concentrated on each other's, well, they were both interested in these things, but mainly each other. I mean, Jack could read Proust by himself, right? But to share it with Neal.
I come in here yesterday and jumping and jittery around, and so it looked like I was high, so I just let people think I was high.
Neal Cassady was the individual American, the prototype that contained Americana.
I heard you got busted.
Oh, yes, I got busted.
What happened?
There were 14 of us sitting in Keasy's, and here come 15 deputies. One of them was a girl, doesn't count.
Yeah.
About midnight. Possession of marijuana, I don't know.
So there's a lot of things in his books where I can see him putting on this macho trip, which was so foreign to him. So then he meets Neal, who is just naturally, gracefully macho. A lot of prowess with women and, not the fisticuffs type. As I said, Neal would run if anybody wanted to attack him, But just this swaggering sort of macho thing that I'm sure Jack envied, the ease with which Neal just could do it. And yet Neal also had the humane, compassionate nature that Jack had, so they understood each other on that level. And yet Jack was so awkward and really funny watching them both go down the street together. And then in Jack, you see, Neal envied the education and the security of a middle-class home or something, or a place in society. Neal had none.
So in the last page of On the Road, I describe how the hero, Dean Moriarty's come to see me all the way from the West Coast just for a day or two. We've just been back and forth across the country several times in cars, and now our adventures are over. We're still great friends, but we have to go into later phases of our lives.
Neal was called to go on a hold-down, they call it, which means you had to go to some town on the run and stay there for 2 weeks and run the locals. So when he left, he said, well, my best gal, my best pal, don't do anything I wouldn't do, kind of thing. And I was insulted, that he would have even thought that I would do anything like that when he was gone. And so was Jack. He blushed scarlet, and for 2 weeks we didn't look at each other. We pussyfooted and avoided each other, and he stayed in the attic and didn't eat, and I'm taking care of the kids, and we're all just going, both of us just way out of our way not to get anywhere near each other. And I said to Neal, now, did you mean that, or were you just saying it because you were afraid it might happen and you didn't want to look like a cuckold or something? And he said, no, I thought it might be nice. And I said, okay, let's do it your way and see how nice it is, because I really was mad. So it was not hard to arrange. Jack and I had been holding off. So then everything was fine, because when Neal came back from the next job, which was just, overnight or a day or so, he could sense the change immediately, so we never had to confess and never say anything. So then we all had meals together, and we'd all sit around the table, and Neal would snipe at Jack, from time to time, which was wonderful, because, I got all these attention from Neal that had been lacking for a long time. And they both just sort of compete with each other and both try to entertain me, and I'm sitting there with, And then they never went out. This is when we sat around and read plays and talked in that tape recorder thing and listened to music, and it was fine. They both stayed home watching the other one.
Jack's erotic life was rather seasonal. I mean, he didn't live in New York, for one thing. He lived during those years. He lived on Long Island with his mother. And then when he had finished writing a stretch of stuff and was ready to play, he would come into New York for 3 days or a week and simply crash in other people's paths, mine very often, during which he would usually get involved with a woman, and that would go on until he felt entrapped or it was time to go back to work, and then he'd go home.
People really wanted to make contact with him, like physically. Women were, wanted him to make love to them and so on. I remember one woman saying to me at a party, "You're 21, I'm 29, I have to fuck him now."
He was sweet and wonderful and unpretentious, and I don't know, he was so kind and so nice and so gentle and sensitive and intelligent, and Jesus, I can't think of enough adjectives to say.
So would you say that that women were definitely second in his life to writing?
Yes, everything was second in his life to writing.
He knew he couldn't stay in one place and raise a family. He kept dreaming about it and talking about it. And I don't think he ever consciously spelled this out. But the evidence shows that all the women that he was closest to were either married or attached to somebody and no threat. And that's why he got along so well with those of us who were safe. He knew enough, at least instinctively, that there was no way he could settle down and take care of a child. He couldn't take care of anybody.
I keep falling in love with my mother. I don't want to hurt her. Of all people to hurt. Every time I see her, she's grown older. But her uniform always amazes me for its Dutch simplicity and the doll she is. The doll-like way she stands, bow-legged in my dreams, waiting to serve me. And I am only an Apache, smoking hashi in old Kabashi by the lamp.
I never heard such language in my life as Jack used on his mother and his mother used on Jack. But he was calling her a filthy old fish cunt. Get out of here, you old whore. And really awful language, both of them drunk.
She drank too.
Did she? She was as much of an alcoholic as he was, according to him.
Stop that.
No, that was a whole secret of it. They would drink together in those years.
Now, his mother was a very down-to-earth, very, very intelligent, capable woman. And she grew embarrassed at the obvious drunkenness of Kerouac, and especially when he started to get maudlin about his feelings for her. And she said, Jackie, don't talk about these things in front of your guest. And he said, why not? He said, like, you're the only woman I've ever wanted to marry, Ma, There
was a little alley in San Francisco, back of the Southern Pacific Station at 3rd and Townsend, in red brick of drowsy, lazy afternoons with everybody at work in offices. In the air you feel the impending rush of their commuter frenzy. As soon they'll be charging en masse from Market and Sansom buildings on foot and in buses and all well-dressed through working man Frisco of walk-up truck drivers. And even the poor grime-bemarked 3rd Street of lost bums, even Negroes so hopeless and long left east, and meanings of responsibility and try, that now all they do is stand there spitting in the broken glass, sometimes 50 in one afternoon against one wall at 3rd and Howard. Here's all these Millbrae and San Carlos neat necktied producers and commuters of America and steel civilization rushing by with San Francisco Chronicles and green call bulletins, not even enough time to be disdainful. They've got to catch 130, 132, 134, 136, all the way up to 146, till the time of evening supper in homes of the railroad earth, when high in the sky the magic stars ride above the following hot-shot freight trains. It's all in California. It's all a sea. I swim out of it in afternoons of sun-hot meditation in my jeans with head on handkerchief on brakeman's lantern or, if not working, on book. I look up at blue sky of perfect lost purity and feel the warp of wood of old America beneath me. And I have insane conversations with Negroes in second-story windows above, and everything is pouring in. The switching moves of boxcars in that little alley, which is so much like the alleys of Lowell, and I hear far off in the sense of coming night that engine calling our mountains.
But it was that beautiful cut of clouds I could always see above the little SP alley. Puffs floating by from Oakland, or the gate of Marin to the north, or San Jose south. The clarity of Cal to break your heart.
He was a prose writer, all right, that had a lot of poetic things in it. He was not a poetry prose writer. What is it called? Prose poems?
Yeah.
No way. He was a prose writer.
In the sense of being, he was a storyteller.
But the way he laid it down, you would call poetic.
Kerouac would get into shape for a couple of days before one of these long stints. He would sleep a lot. He would probably take a lot of baths. You might even go out running. He was an athlete, after all. So he would prepare himself that way and get himself all poised, knowing that he was going to just have to run headlong until he dropped.
He'd sit down and write continuously for several days and then sleep and then write again, or maybe continuously for 24-hour or 18-hour period, using Benzodrine and coffee, and then sleep it off. And I think 3 or 4 of his books he wrote that way. Not all.
He chose to do the hardest, most difficult thing, which is fly in the face of convention and write the way he pleased to write, knowing full well that some people might call it typing rather than writing, which they did.
And now it's night in 3rd Street. The keen little neons and also yellow bulb lights of impossible-to-believe flops. The dark, ruined shadows moving back of torn yellow shades like a degenerate China with no money. The cats in Annie's alley. The flop comes on, moans, rolls. The street is loaded with darkness. Blue sky above with stars hanging high over old hotel roofs and blowers of hotels moaning out dusts of interior. The grime inside the word-in mouths falling out tooth by tooth. The reading rooms tick-tock, big clock with creak chair and slant boards and old faces looking up over rimless spectacles bought in some West Virginia or Florida or Liverpool, England pawn shop long before I was born. And across rains, they've come to the end of the land's sadness, end of the world gladness. All your San Francisco will have to fall eventually and burn again.
You know, at the end of the novel, Big Sur, there is a 10 or 20-page sound poem of what the ocean said to Jack. Big Sur actually means Lawrence Ferlinghetti's cabin, which was under the Bixby Canyon Bridge down there, which was a place of extraordinary natural beauty. And Lawrence's cabin almost under this bridge. The bridge was hundreds of feet above. The Pacific Ocean beating up on the shaly beach there, and a little point of land that Jack was going out and sitting on, writing down what he heard the ocean say, which is always been for me one of the more remarkable transcriptions. It would go, the ocean was saying something like shler boom blash krishta boom ba was pashusa tha shasha thalasa immersion of missy old boatmen riding through the night shaboom ba shash. And Jack took us down there in the night and sat there on the point, and we listened to it. And then I guess it must have been by flashlight or something, with the mist drifting over the little silver stars up there, read the poem of what the ocean said to him as the ocean was saying whatever it was saying behind him.
There was an enormous fellowship between Kerouac and friends like Burroughs and Ginsberg and Corso. That, however, was a tricky kind of relationship because they were all relating to each other as writers or people who were involved in the adventure of drugs or a whole kind of feelings of alienation from mainstream American society, okay? But on the other hand, Kerouac's feelings about his own sexuality or about his own religion or about his own origins remained back in Lowell with his mother and the working class background that he totally was into. Emotionally, that's where he lived.
Jack Kerouac was not only a writer, but a sort of a saint, a mystic. He was a mystic, and I always believed in him. And he said, Always, he was fascinated by the mysterious and the religion. And later on in life, I told him he was drinking much, and I heard about that. And I said, well, Jack, you're not afraid of hell or something? Oh, well, he said, I'm not concerned about hell, I'm concerned about heaven. He says, I have to be high, because I get my inspiration and all that. But he was like a monk himself. His bedroom at his home with his mother was very, very simple. All he had was his bed, a chair, the desk, and piles of paper like that, and on him, and his typewriter, And right over the desk was a big crucifix. He always had the devotion for the crucifix.
Calling yourself a Buddhist is not like calling yourself a Catholic. We'll say that Jack was on the way, as all Buddhists are. And there are no Buddhists. There are just people who are on the way. Jack had digested all of that in dusty little railroad town libraries. Not just one book, no, many books of primary Sanskrit Buddhist material, and had absorbed all the imagery. And then that comes back out in Mexico City Blues, and in particular in the scripture of the Golden Eternity, which is pure Indian Buddhist metaphor. Jack had it all in him already, the poetic metaphors of the Buddhist sutras. And the vast scale, eons, eon upon eon of cosmos after cosmos coming into existence and disappearing, countless beings from angels and gods down to demons and dwarves down to centipedes and lizards, all practicing the Dharma together. Jack loved those metaphors.
That must have been like Catholicism for him in that sense.
It's like a bigger Catholicism.
Yeah.
A huge Catholicism.
To what extent do you believe that the Beat generation is related to the hippies?
Oh,
what do they have in common? Was this an evolution from the one to the other?
They're just the older ones.
Yeah.
So I'm 46 years old. These kids are 18.
The whole Beat movement, which has become a worldwide cultural revolution, absolutely unprecedented. There's never been anything like it before. Penetrating the Arab countries, which was really a hermetic society. And then their affiliation with the political activists, all that went on in the 60s. Although the Beats were originally non-political, others who were political were really following the Beat movement to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, that's the point, yeah.
No, it's just a movement which is supposed to be licentious, but it isn't really.
Well, not licentious in what respect?
The hippies are good kids. They're better than the Beat. The Beats, see, Ginsberg and I, and, well, Ginsberg, boy. We're all in our 40s, and we started this, and the kids took it up and everything. But a lot of hoodlums, and communists jumped on our backs. Well, on my back, not his. Ferlinghetti jumped on my back and turned the idea that I had that the Beat generation was a generation of beatitude and pleasure in life and tenderness. But they called it in the papers Beat mutiny, Beat insurrection. Words I never used, being a Catholic.
Kerouac didn't seem to have any sense of that or desire for it or acceptance of it.
Well, no, he didn't. He was completely apolitical. I don't think he ever took part in a demonstration or signed a petition. But he started it. As Jesus Christ said, by their fruits ye shall know them, not by their disclaimers.
He just sat there, starting another fifth of Johnny Walker, and poured us both glasses of champagne, California champagne, which his mother said was the only thing she could touch because her stomach was delicate. And he just got drunker and drunker.
We very often saw Jack, and it was very sad to see what was happening to his face and everything else just from all that booze.
Why do you think that he drank so much?
He told me once, he said, I'm a Catholic and I can't commit suicide and I wouldn't do it to my family, but I plan to drink myself to death.
Are a significant number of Americans precisely at an age when we enunciated the Great Society.
Great Society.
i.e. the society that was actually going to introduce politics
As
as
far as I'm
relevant in
concerned,
everything, are they disillusioned, and does this have to do with the growth of the hippie movement?
in the first place, I think that the Vietnamese War is nothing but a plot between the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese, who are cousins, to get jeeps in the country. And as for...
They're not very good plotters, are they?
They got a lot of jeeps.
It was interesting because Jack was pretty drunk. Occasionally he would space out and not hear. He was bored, thinking other things to himself, was a little bit bored, didn't give a shit about television or the circumstance or the sacredness or the unsacredness or the publicness of the situation. He was just himself 100%, willing to go to sleep in front of the television set.
Alcohol makes people see conspiracies.
And you got to remember, the American media is a tough fucker, man. Really can get on you. They can say things on you that you never said, and people get the image of you that way.
Movement. No, I interrupted your sentence.
Yeah, I say, what distinguishes the hippie movement from simply an orthodox, radical,
nothing,
Adamite movement?
Adamite?
There was a
Adam and Eve, or atom?
Adam.
I gave Jack a little shoulder hug, and we said so long, shook hands, and he walked away, and I walked away. And maybe 30 seconds or so later, in the stillness of the night, I heard this distant voice yelling, "Hey, Steve!" And I looked around, and it was Jack. And once he knew he had my attention, he went like that, and down the street from about a block and a half away yelled, "Why not?" And I laughed.
Great.
And that was the last I saw him.
Hey, Ed, I was arrested 2 weeks ago, and the arresting policeman said, "I'm arresting you for decay."
What the devil was that?
Aching cock-love nights and cobweb moons, the mist of tired, dusted evening, the corn, the silk, the moon, the rail. That is in one's maturity. But you'll never be as happy as you are now in your quiltish, innocent, book-devouring boyhood, immortal night.
Like he not burst into tears, but tears would come to his eyes very often in his later years in conversation when he talked about something that he felt sentiment about. His mother, his cats, his writing, his novels, state of America, but particularly music, or Christ, particularly the crucifixion. Because he was going through crucifixion. That is the mortification of his body. Okay. And so he was painting. And so at that point, last 10 years, he was painting cardinals, popes, crosses, and Christs on the cross. And writing equivalent poems and prose.
And yet this conference...
Vanity of Duluoz is about that.
And yet this conference is about joy, it seems like. I mean, that's the Kerouac, that's the gift, and more than the
Yeah,
the
it's
suffering.
about joy, but the kind of tears is tears of, I mean, there's one taste. Joy and suffering at a certain point become one taste. Because it's existence itself. You're crying over existence, not in existence. The tears are appreciation of existence. And the beauty and mortality, and the beauty and mortality and sadness of leaving existence. And the suffering of existence, which is so deep that it's joyful.
Suddenly I turned. Dr. Sachs was standing there. "What do you want, Dr. Sachs?" I said immediately. Didn't want to hide. Didn't want the shade to overcome me and I pass out. I know that Dr. Sachs is speaking to the bottom of my boy problems, and they could all be solved if I could fathom his speech. Came the long, hollow, sepulchral sound of triumphant Dr. Sachs's profound and hidden laughter. I made my own cackle laugh with hands cupped in the excruciatingly exciting dark shadows of Saturday night.
To this day, the grave is visited daily by a lot of people. They commit to it because they have to find it. It's very hard to find. There's only a little marker that is flush with the ground, and it's Tijan Kerouac, the dates.
Grief is not unadulterated pain. Grief is also mixed with a sense of majesty and finality and realization of ultimate reality. And so that's why people weep, because they realize that the ultimately real is ultimately real, and irrevocably so. And there's only one life, and this is it.
We've just been back and forth across the country several times in cars, and now our adventures are over. We're still great friends, but we have to go into later phases of our lives. So there he goes, Dean Moriarty, ragged in the moth-eaten overcoat he brought specially for the freezing temperatures of the East, walking off alone, and last I saw him, he rounded the corner of 7th Avenue, eyes on the street ahead, and bent to it again. Gone. So, in America, when the sun goes down, and I sit on the old broken-down river pier watching the long, long skies over New Jersey, and sense all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the West Coast, and all that road going, and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it. In an hour, I know by now that children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry. And tonight the stars will be out, and don't you know that God is Pooh Bear? The evening star must be drooping and shedding her sparkler dims on the prairie, which is just before the coming of complete night that blesses the earth, darkens all the rivers, cups the peaks, and folds the final shore in. Nobody knows what's going to happen to anybody besides the forlorn rags of growing old. Think of Dean Moriarty, or even think of old Dean Moriarty, the father we never found. Think of Dean Moriarty, I think of Dean Moriarty.